Hello and welcome to the Life and Memoir Circle, a podcast for readers, writers and tellers of true life stories who loves a good memoir. I'm your host, Vig Gleason, and you are exactly the person I want to have a conversation with today. So use the link in the show notes and get in touch. I can't wait to hear your story. In today's episode, I want to read you this story about how uncomfortable I have felt for decades about going to the hairdresser. It sounds rather ridiculous, doesn't it? And to be honest, I felt a bit shameful about this. Every woman should love going to the hairdresser and having her hair done, right? But not me. Not until I figured out what the cause of this feeling was. Now, I'm using the word trauma in the widest possible sense here. I let you judge for yourself. So now, let's get into the story. Edward Scissorhands, A Trauma Theory by Vig Gleason. The extent to which you know your inner child is proportionate to how well you know yourself. What I know about myself as a small child is that I was hypersensitive. Every child is different, and not all children are sensitive. But my theory is that for the sensitive child, it is how she communicates with her inner self. At least for me, it was how I made sense of what was happening around me during the early years of my life, when I didn't have the life experience or vocabulary to fully grasp my environment. It doesn't take much to wound a sensitive child like myself. A harsh word or a mom running after you through the house with scissors, wanting to cut off your hair rather than brush out the knots that appeared overnight, can leave wounds you feel in your adult life without remembering how you got hurt in the first place. When small, quote, traumas, unquote, like this happens in childhood, and some trauma happens to all of us, fears get programmed into the emotional center of our brain, where our survival instinct goes in search of ways to protect us against similar traumas when they appear in our adult life. You still with me? It's inevitable, when you're 12 and you don't plait your long hair before bed, that you wake up with a great big knot at the back of your head. So when your mom turns all Edward Scissorhands, the next thing you do is exactly what your mother tells you to do. You go to the hairdresser and get your hair cut short. If you're a sensitive child like I was, and the hairdresser isn't exactly treating you with kitten gloves, instead she's chatty and asks you all sorts of questions about what hairstyle you like, and you're really awkward and shy, before you get the answer out, she's already made the decision for you, and you end up with the most god-awful haircut. You're a gangly, tall, scrawny and awkward pre-teen. And now, with the long hair gone, you look like a boy. Suddenly your life is plummeting down spirals. What could be worse for a 12-year-old girl than looking like a boy? Everything feels out of control. You think you've learned from the lesson when you swear never to cut your hair short ever again. Short hair has now become a major trauma, completely overshadowing your mum's turned Edward Scissorhands experience. But you don't learn. Somehow the trauma has affected your logic, and despite your better judgment, you cut your hair short a few more times. Easier to manage, you tell yourself, believing the sound of your mother's voice in your head. But then, after 20 years of looking at the same framed photo of himself and yourself, the penny finally drops. How could you not have noticed that short, poofed-up hairdo that makes you want to hide your wedding photo? Some friends laugh at your boffin when they see the photo, and it becomes kind of a subject of amusement and a reason to tell the story. So you don't put the photo away. Instead, it sits on the shelf reminding you to look after your hair because you want to keep it long. Reluctantly, you go to the hairdresser and wonder, whoever cuts your hair, you always feel out of sort in the chair. Over the years, you learn a thing or two about childhood trauma, and now, with 40 minutes on the clock till the collar sets, you wonder where that feeling of discomfort comes from. When you remember, you can't help but wonder what came over your mum the day she turned into Edward Scissorhands. It wasn't her normal behaviour, so something other than your hair in knots for the 3rd time that week must have triggered her to react so violently. She was definitely releasing anger on your hair when you gave her the brush. She so roughly pulled through your hair it made you scream in pain and wrestle her off your back where she'd pinned you to the floor before you ran away. Trauma, you know now, is recognized as being passed down from generations, but as far as you're aware, not normally through the application of a humble hairbrush. Perhaps something about the situation triggered discomfort from her own childhood. Well, now you'll never know. So decades later, you still don't like going to the hairdresser, but love brushing your daughter's hair. When she asks you to plait her hair, you relish the intimate, tender moment between you. Your heart swells and at the same time aches for the moment you lost with your own mum. A slightly different version of this story is on my website, where you can also see some photographs and an explanation on how many rounds of revisions this story has taken before it arrived into your ears today. If you have a similar story you would like to come on air with me to talk about, I would love to hear from you. And also, if you enjoyed today's episode, please give me a 5-star rating and share it with your friends, because every story matters, and the more people we share our stories with, the better we can all feel. You will find all the links in the show notes. Until next time, right on.